The world is louder and more chaotic than ever. That's why clarity and truth have never been more important. Welcome to the Trust Factor Podcast. Good morning and thank you for joining another episode of the Trust Factor Podcast coming off of Passover 2026, 5786. I hope it was an enjoyable one for you. It certainly was for me, even though it was a marathon. It went on and on and on, especially when it bleeds right into Shabbat. But Baruch Hashem, it was a lot of downtime, a lot of relaxation, really badly needed rest. I often find myself saying, you know what? The holidays come at the worst time, which is really the best time because it's so hard for us to pull away from the things that we're doing. Oftentimes businesses are ebbing and flowing just around the same time that the holidays come in. And so it makes it that much more difficult, but therefore that much more important and meaningful. When you can pull yourself away from the craziness and the mayhem that's going on in the world, especially in business, and you could force yourself to take that pause, then you realize only after you've taken it how necessary it was and how badly you needed it. So the Jewish nation is free again, free from slavery, from bondage. Now, in theory, we know that's the case from thousands of years ago. But what about today? Today, we're working on it, my friends. Each and every one of us is working on our own personal freedom, reflecting back on the things that keep us down, that hold us back, that take us away from being present, and trying to change them, get them out of our lives. We don't want the things that lock us down. We're not interested in them. That's for the masses. If the masses want that garbage, let them keep it. Whatever those things are, those vices, the addictions, the requirements to be on your phone all day long, to constantly be thinking about work, all of these things that are a ball and chain, they don't belong to us anymore because we are free. Passover just confirmed that for us again. Let's do everything we can together every day, my friends, to remind each other that we shouldn't have these distractions and we should be focused, hyper-focused, only on the things that matter the most. Justice. It says in the Torah, Tzedek, terdof. You need to run after justice. Justice is not a nice idea that we should utilize once in a while. Justice is a cornerstone of any civilized society. And so, when we're talking about judges who are obviously in a very important position of authority, then you understand that if there was ever a holy job, it is that of a judge. And the police officer is very closely related because they are both enforcing the law and they are both maintaining civil order. Without it, there is simply chaos. And that's how important they are. But because they are on the top of the quote-unquote food chain when it comes to that issue, their responsibility is that much greater than most of us. And that's why there have been so many laws that have been written just for judges. We're not generally supposed to judge people, right? Because it tells us that if you're going to judge somebody, then the way that you judge them, you'll be judged. That if you start to judge somebody, then an investigation will be opened up into your life. The very fact that you're starting to try and uncover and investigate somebody else's deeds causes the heavens to open up your book. Let's look and see what Jesse's been doing. He's so quick to judge somebody else. Maybe he's the one that needs to be judged. So let's take a look. Because we said the things that we do in this world, God acts with us measure for measure. And so if we're judging, he will judge us. And if we judge harshly, he'll judge harshly. And if we judge fairly, he'll judge fairly. So as soon as I decide it's time for me to investigate Joe, then God says it's time for me to investigate Jesse. You understand? It's how it works. So you got to be very careful, my friends. Spectacularly careful. It's not a light idea. Nobody wants to be on the chopping block. Nobody wants to be in front of a judge who's going to make a decision that could harm them. And that includes you, and therefore it includes everybody else. So we've said you're not supposed to judge, but let's be real for a second, okay? Who's the ultimate judge? Who is the number one judge in the universe? Our Creator, our Father. So therefore, because it is our job to be like him, which we've said many times, our 30,000-foot job for every single human being on the planet is to emulate their Creator. And he is the top judge in the world. That's what he's known for. And he blew inside of our nostrils a piece of him. Then we know that it is our job to also judge. And so Hashem warns us. He says, if you're going to judge, then you need to judge favorably. What does that mean? It means that we need to give people the benefit of the doubt. We always have to err on the side of mercy. Always. Now, there are obviously times when the crime is heinous. There are obviously times when you have people who are dangers to society, and those people need to be dealt with. You have an obligation to save society from people who are dangerous. But generally speaking, you always have to give people the benefit of the doubt and assume that there were good intentions. Always judge every person favorably. When you understand that judges play a critical role in society, and without that judicial system, there would be chaos in the world, then you understand that their influence and responsibility on humanity is absolutely tremendous. And a judge needs to know, any judge, if you happen to be a judge yourself, or if you're judging between friends, or if you're judging your children, we all do this. We run through life micro-judgments. Oh, I just saw an individual do X, Y, and Z. Micro-judgment. Happens in my head in a split second. We all do this. It doesn't have to be a formal courtroom. It could be you at work, looking at your coworkers and seeing how they behave and interact with your bosses. And suddenly you find yourself judging them. It's okay, because we know that we're programmed to judge. But how are you judging them? Are you judging them negatively? Are you always just gravitating right towards the worst case scenario, finding yourself pointing out all of the faults of this individual? Or are you constantly thinking, I don't know what this coworker of mine is going through. I have no idea what it's like to be in their shoes. In fact, it says that you shouldn't judge somebody until you've walked a mile in their shoes. We've heard that before, right? But the reality is you've never walked a mile in anybody else's shoes. Maybe figuratively you may have in your life, but in reality you will never be in anybody else's shoes, because you cannot experience two existences at the same time. You simply don't know the household that person was raised in. You don't know the siblings that they have, the schools that they went to, the interactions and exchanges that they have. Never mind just in this life. What about all the previous existences? We don't even begin to have a clue. So you simply cannot judge somebody. But if you have to judge, which is what society requires of us, then you judge favorably. You don't jump based on biases, based on what you see with your eyes or what you hear from a third party. Because you're a judge, you have an obligation to investigate deeply and not to jump to conclusions, which so many of us do. Oftentimes, we don't even investigate. We just see something unfold in front of us, and in our minds immediately, we know who the aggressor is and we know who the victim is. Just look at Israel. You think it's coincidence? Israel is a tiny, tiny nation on a tiny strip of land surrounded by its enemies since its inception. And every war that has been waged against her has been a war of aggression that Israel found itself defending herself against. And despite the fact that we've taken so many losses, so much of our own blood has been spilled trying to defend that country, it doesn't matter. Why? Because we won. And because we won, then the masses, with their ignorance and their unwillingness to investigate, automatically lay blame at our feet. Because we won, because we came out victorious, because we were the victor and there were people who were quote unquote losers. They lost in the battle, and therefore the bleeding hearts come out, and it doesn't matter who started it. It doesn't matter what it was all about. The victor is the aggressor because they're more powerful, and so they have to bring them down. That's what happens when you operate from a position of ignorance. And so a judge has all the more duty to educate themselves and also be careful, because judges, by the role that they're in, are put in a unique position to be able to shame and embarrass people in public settings. Think about it. You have somebody who's standing in front of you who has to watch what they say. They have to be very careful and meter their words. They have to speak respectfully to the judge. And the judge doesn't have to do the same thing. It's their quote-unquote courtroom. And oftentimes we see these judges acting in a way that is unbecoming, taking advantage of their position. No coincidence. I just saw a video. You may have seen it. It's popular. It's going around. A judge in the U.S. abusing his authority. Calls in an IT guy because he thinks he's having a problem with his microphone, I believe. IT guy, young, nice kid, positive attitude, comes in, sees nothing's going on. Maybe the judge made a mistake, and he says, false alarm, with a smile on his face. He's laughing, and he says, what's that false alarm it looks like? And the judge rips him to shreds, calls in his supervisor and starts laying into everybody in the courtroom at that time. And then the spotlight's on this judge. And for a week now, everybody's been following this judge and scrutinizing his every step. You see how this works, guys? You understand? God says, okay, you're going to tear into everybody else. You're going to publicly shame everybody. You're going to abuse your power. Hashem says, no problem. Let's keep this guy in the spotlight. And this judge gets a week or two of nonstop internet publicity. And do you know what it ends with? The judge loses his job. You think it's a coincidence? There's no such thing as coincidence, my friends. This individual came at those people that he felt he was superior to. He embarrassed them, not just in public, but on the internet. It went viral. And people are watching these hardworking, honest people, trying to be good people, getting chopped up into pieces by this power-hungry judge. And Hashem deals with him in the exact same way. And the way he wanted to get this IT guy fired, do you know what happened? The same thing that happened to Haman. The same thing that happened to Khomeini. He tried to hurt others, and Hashem made sure that it backfired on him. He lost his job. Guys, happens all the time to every single one of us. If you have eyes to see it, then you're careful with the way that you behave. The lives of people hinge on their verdicts. Judges need to steer clear of hastiness and cruelty. They should take advantage of their power to educate and help people to better their ways. Everybody has seen this judge. I can't remember his name. He's an older judge, older Italian fellow. And he was known for being the nicest judge in the world. He just passed away recently. But what a celebrity he became. Why did he become a celebrity? Because he was a nice judge. Because he went out of his way to be kind to the people who stood before him. I forget his name. I wish I could remember it. But this judge was everywhere. And he had a big heart. And he looked for the good in people. And he focused on the good things that were happening in their lives. And he asked them, tell me about your life. Tell me your story. Give me some backdrop on who I'm dealing with here. He wants to know. And he wants to reinforce for himself that I'm dealing with a human being. I'm dealing with a father, a grandfather, a great-grandfather. I'm dealing with a human being who's capable of making mistakes, who's contributed to the world. Tell me about your army service. Tell me about what you've done for this nation. And only after he's gone through that whole backdrop of who this individual is, that now he has just a sliver of an understanding of who he's talking to, then he says, okay, let's talk about this ticket you got. Let's talk about this charge that you're faced with. Tell me about it. And now he's talking to a different person. Now he's no longer talking to a number. Now it's no longer just a job for him. Now there's real consequence. There's a real person standing in front of me. And whatever verdict I lay out here is going to have ripple effects. And even you could see if you've watched his cases, DiCaprio, that was his name, something DiCaprio. When you watch some of his cases, you saw that even though everybody's thinking you got to be stricter with this guy's trying to take advantage of you, judge, he's still judged favorably. And because of that, he was a celebrity, the exact opposite of the judge that I just told you about, who ended up losing his job and walked out in shame. His whole family's going to watch that video. Everybody he knows is going to watch him berate people and abuse his power and get fired. And at the other side of the coin, you've got this other judge. Again, I think it's DiCaprio, who becomes a celebrity. He's on the face of magazines. His children become celebrities afterwards at his funeral, and they're giving interviews. The whole world loves this judge. My friends, be that judge. Judge favorably. Judge with kindness. Remember, first understand that you're dealing with a human being and that your actions and your decisions have ripple effects. And then, only then, when you've cemented in your mind that I'm dealing with somebody that is just like me and would want to get the benefit of leniency and mercy just like me, and that's what Hashem does. He's constantly lenient. He's constantly merciful. Even though we go against him, I'm going to be just like Hashem, and I'm going to constantly find mercy and be lenient. Have an amazing day, my friends. We chat tomorrow. Thank you for spending time with us on the Trust Factor podcast. If you've heard something today that moved you, save this episode and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss upcoming conversations that challenge, empower, and uplift. And if you're on social media, connect with us. Leave your thoughts. Drop a quote that resonated with you. Hashtag the Trust Factor podcast. Until next time, keep growing in your trust and keep living with purpose. I'm Jesse Revivo, and this has been the Trust Factor podcast. Thanks for listening.